All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Once again, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. My name is Arun. I'm a solutions engineer here at Cynote. And today we're excited to talk to you about the future of kit development with a focus on the impact of digitalization, compliance, and machine learning. I'm joined by my wonderful fellow panelists today, Mathias and Jana, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Jana, over to you first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sino, for inviting me. So I'm Jana Erjavec. I'm Chief Digitalization Officer and Digitalization Consultant at Biosystemica. Biosystemica is a company that helps organizations with their efforts in digitalization. So we help them map the processes, we do benchmarking of solutions, and also help with the change management, which is really important. So that's briefly about me.
Thank you, Jana. Mathias?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mathias. I'm the VP of Product Management at Cynote. So I'm always eager to discuss the potential uses of ELNs to promote the digitalization. And today I'll be happy to share some of my views how ELNs can be a part of digitalization, specifically related to kit and reagent manufacturing.
Excellent. Thank you, Mathias and Jana. And now we'll just quickly go over the agenda for today's webinar. Can we jump to the next? Yeah, there we go. So we're going to start out by discussing digitization in reagents and kit development. Jana is going to be going over what this means and how the role of digitalization in product development and what the benefits are across each stage of your product lifecycle and what challenges and compliance considerations you need to take into account, and then how the change management and digitalization process works. And from there, we're going to take a look at a brief overview of the reagent and kit development process while focusing on how an ELN can add certain advantages to you during different stages of product development. And lastly, we're going to close it up with an open discussion on emerging trends we've noticed based on questions, feedback we get from our customers and prospects. And then we're going to save some questions or some time at the end for a Q&A session. For the Q&A session, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box that you'll see on the Zoom control panel. All right, I think we can jump to the next slide, and Jana, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
All right, so I will start with digitalization in general and how it applies to the kit manufacturing process. So just quickly, for those of you who are not that familiar with the terminology, so digitization means that basically you transform physical documents into a digital form. For example, if you have safety data sheets on your paper, then you scan them, they're now in a PDF format. This is digitizing information. If you're using digital technologies to optimize processes or automate them, this is called digitalization, and you're doing optimization. And then digital transformation means that you apply digitalization to transform business. So your business actually works in a different way. Perhaps you have different business models, etc. Moving forward, of course, as you are well aware, there are many challenges in reagents and kit manufacturing. So you need to make sure that that you're compliant with different types of regulation, that you ensure data integrity. So digital tools can definitely help here. Also, the entire process, has so many different applications, tools, instruments. So interoperability and data integration can pose a tremendous challenge, especially if some of the processes are still paper-based and some are already digital, as we will see later. Then maintaining quality so that the quality doesn't vary between different batches, between different kits or different production side. That's key as well. Cybersecurity threats are more and more, are really problematic. So, digitalization can definitely save some of the burden, but on the other hand, cybersecurity is also an important aspect when you're considering which tool to choose. So, the vendors need to prove that, their applications are secure. And of course, other challenges like, employee training and change management in general. When you're implementing new things, it's not easy to adopt these technologies, as we will see later. Of course, you also need to ensure the scalability and flexibility. If you're, so supply and demand, if the demand varies, of course, you need to adapt very quickly, and digitalization can definitely help with that. And of course, keeping inventory and supplies under control. This is absolutely important. So if we look at the entire life cycle, we have the research part, development, and manufacturing part. And development and manufacturing are really, they need to address all the compliance demands. So in whichever field you work in, development and manufacturing have very strict, need to meet very strict compliance rules. And that is why there's no surprise that, there are more digital solutions already present in this part of the process. So like laboratory execution systems, manufacturing execution systems, document management systems, because these systems help people to optimize, to generate reports or submission files faster, to actually show to the auditors, that all the information is traceable. On the other hand, research is, the source of, new IP, is where all this different data is being generated. Really great results, come from out of research, or negative results if you want. But historically, there hasn't been a real demand that, research needs to prove every aspect of, compliance, traceability. So that is why we actually see that in research there are still, not many ELNs implemented. So today we are going to speak a lot about the research aspect and how, ELNs can help here. And very briefly, so in R&D, if you have a digital tool, it can help with faster innovation, because it simplifies data collection, and it enhances collaboration, knowledge sharing, and that's why you can innovate faster. Also, if you collect data in a systematic way, you can really have data-driven insights. And perhaps, if we will be discussing later on in this webinar, this is also a foundation for any kind of machine learning algorithm, so that you have your data very well organized. Of course, there are benefits for those of you who haven't digitalized development and manufacturing as well. There are many benefits here as well, like enhanced traceability and compliance, improved QBD, general optimization of the processes, digital twins, which is also one of the trends that's really coming up now. So that's great as well. And in general, just optimized, quality control and inventory management. So in general, as you can see, there are benefits across the entire life cycle. So as an organization, you can achieve faster time to market. You gain this regulatory agility. It's easier to continuously improve because you have a faster feedback. Because you work with real-time data, so you get faster feedback. You can improve faster. Then if you apply some customer-facing digital tools to perhaps collect feedback from your customers, then you can have more customer-centric development. And last but not least, also improve sustainability, not just in terms of that you throw away less reagents because you have a better inventory overview, but also how you use your resources. So how, where your people put their focus into. So there has been different report on productivity gains. Personally, productivity is not the only benefit, right? And it really depends which process you look into. But in general, you get at least 20% productivity gains on average. But then if you optimize certain processes, this can go much higher to 40-60%, as we can perhaps comment later in the discussion. Okay, and for those of you who work in the IVDR segment, digitalization is practically a must for being IVDR compliant. It really helps, as I've said earlier, so I don't want to repeat myself. You can really efficiently manage documents, and you can control traceability. You can manage quality. You have this real-time data collection and reporting is super important. If you have things digitalized, it's much easier to manage risks, so that's great. And basically you're much faster, it's much easier to be audit ready. Okay, but it's not all fairy tale, right? So digitalization has its own challenges as well. And there's also consistent data that about 70% of digital transformation projects fail. Now, I don't want to get your spirits down. It's nothing. It's not surprising, in a way, and it's not that awful if you know what you're facing with. So the reasons why so many digital transformation projects fail is often because there's lack of clear vision. So what you want to achieve as an organization. And once you have your vision, so why are we doing this? Why do we want to digitalize? Where do we want to be in the future as a company or organization or a laboratory, right? And then once you have this vision, you should focus on setting up strategy, how you will achieve this, and set up goals. Because if you don't have this, you won't really know what to implement or when, and the timelines will just extend. Then, lack of resources can be problematic as well. So many times these projects come on top of people's already busy schedules, right? So, you say, okay, we need a LIMS or an ELN or a new manufacturing execution system, and then you assign this project to people who are already overworked, overbooked. So make sure that, or perhaps they don't have the knowledge how to do this as well. This is important. So make sure that you have the people who have experience with dealing with this, or perhaps use existing resources and clear their schedule to the extent that's needed. Of course, budgeting is really important. So make sure you plan ahead, you really think through about the budget, get some prices as well. And last but not least, user resistance. User resistance is nothing particularly, it's nothing that's really new. And it's something that's part of the human nature. So in general, we don't like to change. And it's not unique to the laboratory environment, so you don't need to feel bad about it. And there has been so many papers and research done on user resistance in other industries as well. And very common objections exist that you can predict and also address when you're doing this change, so when you're implementing a tool. So I'll just read through a few here so that you get the picture. So the people might ask, how will I benefit from the system? I don't really see the added value for me. So usually people just see extra work, something that's not necessary. So it's key that you communicate this very well internally, why the change is needed, why you need a new system. So perhaps they will say, I don't have time to change, my schedule is already full, which is true. So you need to take this into account. Also, they might feel that they helped establish the old system, so they feel invested in the old system, and it's sort of not pleasant, not very pleasant if you want to replace something that they have to help to establish. So make sure to ask people for their opinion that they contribute throughout this process. So this is, and what I've started with is actually change management. And understanding change management is really crucial. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you want to make major changes within the organization, this also includes implementing ELN's LIMS system into your kit manufacturing or R&D process. So change management is defined as the process of planning, implementing, and then solidifying changes within the organization. So it's not just important to plan and then implement, it's also important that the implementation is successful only when users adopt it. And management here needs to lead the way with clear vision and goals. And communication is key. If you want to do digitalization, even if it's only one lab, then the lab manager or the head of the lab, whoever is in charge, you need to communicate very clearly, very early on that, why the change is needed, and also ask stakeholders and, ask them for their opinion. They should contribute with the ideas. And with this, when you include all the stakeholders, you sort of establish a digital culture. And then it's much easier. So very briefly about digitalization methodology that we also use, and it's not that complicated. You just need to be consistent. So first of all, start, evaluate the current state of the art, what you have, map your processes. Many times we see that, people believe that they know how their processes work, and then they map them, or we map them for them, and then they see, we don't have this covered and that covered. Make sure also to speak with stakeholders, and then see, where you have the gaps, where are the biggest bottlenecks. And once you have this, you can then prepare sort of a list of requirements, what you will be looking in a system. And if you come with these requirements to an ELN or LIMS vendor, if we're talking more about laboratory environment, then it will be also much easier for the vendor to understand your needs and can also showcase how the features of a system will help you work with the system. Then, of course, define budget timeline and reach out to vendors. Make sure to have implementation plan covered. So who will be working on this? What are the milestones? What are the success metrics? And then post-implementation. Make sure that users are properly trained, that you establish a feedback mechanism. Now that the system is there, it's not necessarily working properly. So make sure that users have the power to say, this doesn't work as I want it to work. I don't know how to use this, etc. And then monitor progress, also celebrate small successes, and then improve if needed. So here is just a brief, very simple process map. So we start with receiving the samples, generating barcode, etc., to the final report generation and sending. So this is, you can read more about this also on Biosystemica blog. It's really well described, or we can speak separately about this. And then also a very, very simple table that can help you with gap analysis. So what's the current state? Describe the current state, what is desired future state, what's the gap, and then what do you think the solution is. So this will give you a very nice overview of what you need. Okay, so just to recap my key points before passing back to Arun. So it really, digitalization helps organizations to stay competitive, and that's a fact. You know, in kit manufacturing, you have seen that digitalization brings benefits in every step of the process. However, you know, when you're doing changes, make sure that you understand change management, and because this really increases chances for successful digitalization. The process needs to be managed appropriately. So I've taken you through the process, and you cannot skip steps. It's not great. And of course, if you don't have the expertise, hiring an expert consultant or consulting company can help you and lead you through the entire process, or just support individual stages, like for example, searching for the right solution. So yeah, that's very briefly from my side.
Thank you, Yana, for that wonderful overview on digitalization and setting the context really for the rest of the presentation. So now we're going to bring this a little bit more specific and take a look at the role that ELNs have to play in reagent and kit development. And we're also going to take an overview of the kit development process, as well as focus on various aspects that an ELN can benefit you during each phase of the process. Okay, so we're first going to just take a quick look at different types of assay kits that you might be working on. You know, these could be immunoassay, molecular assay, serological assays. They could all have different applications, whether they're being used for sample prep, qualitative results, or even quantitative results. And of course, where they're being used, whether they're lab-based diagnostics for high throughput labs, or they're rapid diagnostics, point of care, companion diagnostics, or even at home testing. And lastly, the regulatory requirements may vary, whether you're doing an in vitro diagnostic product that you're commercializing or a lab developed test that you're validating for use within your specific lab. And then we're going to bring back a slide that we looked at previously. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is a slide that Yana briefly discussed earlier. I wanted to bring it back to sort of set the foundation on what we're going to refer to as the product development process here. Now, this process may vary from company to company slightly. You may use different terminology, but for today's webinar, we're going to use this as a reference point for the product development process. Now, we're going to start with a brief overview of this process and just quickly talk about the different activities that happen during each of these phases. So we're going to start with research and feasibility, where you might be doing a market study or market analysis, setting your market requirements for the product based on this, and also doing some feasibility studies to evaluate, do we have the technology to address these market needs? Do we have the resources to do this? Is our product actually going to be feasible? And then, of course, you want to set your regulatory considerations. Are we going for an IVD, RUO, lab developed test? And also where you're commercializing. Is it going to be in the United States, Europe, rest of the world? So all of these generally happen in the very early stage of research and feasibility. From here, we move on to design and development. So here, in the context of assay development, you'll be establishing your initial analytical targets, what you want your LOD or LOQ to be, what's the target sensitivity or specificity you're going for. So all of this you'll be establishing during the design and development phase. And then also, of course, identifying the reagents and materials that are going to be used. Can you source these materials? Are they financially feasible? Are they compatible with the instruments that you're planning on using these reagents on? So all of this happens during the development process as well. And then, of course, you take this information and you move into your initial prototype development. So you try the different combinations together, you see if it works, and based on that, you optimize and try again. So it's a bit of an iterative process. So there's going to be a lot of data generated using different conditions or different materials and methods. And of course, lastly, you're going to do a preliminary evaluation on whether you can hit your analytical targets. And if you can, is this reproducible? Can you do this consistently? And then we're going to move into the verification and validation phase, where you will be doing actual verification of your product requirements and validating your entire design input and outputs as well. So this is also where the clinical validation happens. You'll be implementing your quality control procedures and also doing some risk management and mitigation as well. And then this is going to close out with regulatory submission. So depending on what regulatory considerations you have, you're going to be compiling all that data and submitting it to the relevant regulatory agency. And then once that's done, we are starting to move into manufacturing. So initially, you'll want to do a design transfer of your final product requirements, methods, materials, etc., to the manufacturing team, and then also start doing some supply chain management and optimization. If you're going to be scaling up, you want to make sure your vendors are capable of meeting your throughput demands for your materials. And then once you're done with manufacturing and scale up, you're going to move into commercialization and launch. Of course, a lot of these activities might be overlapping or happening in parallel, but generally the sequence of events is as follows. And this is the phase during which you'll be also setting up your training documentation, how you're going to handle customer support, etc. And then once your product is on the market, you'll have to do your post-market surveillance. You have to have a system or process to address customer complaints, do your CAPA management. And of course, if you want to introduce any improvements, updates, or if you need to do any recalls, all of that is typically handled in the post-market surveillance phase. Okay, now that we had a quick look at the product development process for your assay kit, how does an ELN benefit you during each of these phases? The main message that I would like you to take away from this section is, if you invest time and resources in establishing a strong data management foundation, it can yield ongoing benefits throughout your product lifecycle. And we'll take a quick look at this in more detail in the following slides. We'll first start with the research and feasibility phase. So here, it's important to leverage your early data. So during the early R&D phase, oftentimes your data is not quality controlled since it's not being used for regulatory submission. So it's a bit of a free-for-all in terms of how scientists are organizing the data or capturing their data. But if you can organize your preliminary research data and the methods that you're using in an ELN like SciNote, it can serve as a reference or even templates for later development stages, which makes work a lot more efficient and effective. And then from here, for the design and development phase, this is where you're going to be setting up or creating experimental workflows. And in SciNote, we have a nice structure that you can use to build out your projects, where you can categorize various activities and also build out workflows within the projects, whether you're identifying or establishing analytical targets or doing stability testing, reproducibility, etc. All of these can be handled with the workflows in SciNote, since it does support both linear and nonlinear workflows. And once you have these workflows set up in SciNote, you can reuse them as templates. So if you need to take a workflow you've already established and make a minor adjustment, you can just template it, make an adjustment, and you don't have to rebuild that entire workflow from scratch. And then lastly, we have enhanced traceability all throughout SciNote. So you have the ability to establish traceable links between what reagent was used, what instrument was used, which samples or consumables were used, and what results were yielded from these combination of reagents, instruments, etc. And of course, when you're using protocol templates in SciNote, there is a traceable link between which template was used and the result generated from that template. So all of this together can help simplify drawing correlations between, various materials, methods, and the data generated from them to help help your decision-making process a bit easier. And then when we come to verification and validation, so here it's important to have your V&V data separate from your R&D data to say, quote unquote, keep it clean, since it's going to be used for regulatory submission. And that's where data segregation is important. So in Synode, you have the ability to create separate teams depending on the activity being performed during that phase or within that team. So you would have a separate V&V team in Synode where all of your V&V data will be kept in a formal and organized manner, and there won't be any R&D data or uncontrolled data within that particular team in Synode. And then, of course, each team in Synode can have its own projects, workflows, protocols, inventories, and even its own audit trail. So here's where when you're in the V&V phase, within the V&V team, you can have your own inventory, and you can easily draw correlations between the items used and the results yielded during the V&V testing. And then, of course, if you need to transfer protocols from your R&D phase to V&V, you can do that in Synode. And even inventories, you can basically template an inventory structure from what you used in R&D in the V&V phase, once again, saving you time. And then when you get to regulatory approval in Synode, it makes it very easy to do comprehensive reporting. You can just generate either PDF or Word reports of all of your V&V data. All of data can be compiled, which will include your protocols, results, etc. And you can also do exports of any files that you uploaded during the V&V process that you can attach for your regulatory submission. And then during the manufacturing and scale-up phase, it's important to have efficient knowledge transfer. So if you'd like, you can grant selective access to your manufacturing team to the V&V data, so that way they can view the different methods that were used, what results were yielded, to sort of help set up that manufacturing process in the beginning. And then once again, you can create a new team in Synode for all of your manufacturing data, whether this is data for process validation or even doing initial pilot runs before you optimize the manufacturing process. And then we have the post-market surveillance phase lastly. So here's where you can lean on Synode for supporting any CAPA or audit activities you may have going on. We have a very robust global search functionality where any data that's entered into Synode is searchable, and this also includes data within attachments. And the traceability feature can play an important role here where if you need to check the results that were yielded from a specific lot of reagent that was used, you can easily get this information from Synode. And if you ever need to pull maintenance records or calibration records for any of the instrumentation that was used, if all of these activities were managed in Synode, it makes it very easy to just compile that report for each instrument and include it with any of your submissions that are needed. And then lastly, when you're making any product updates or improvements, you can always leverage and lean on the existing data you already have in Synode. Since it's well organized, this can save you a lot of time, once again, bringing in the templates and workflows into the picture. So maybe you're adding new targets to your panel, or you're optimizing your assay, or maybe even automating your assay, or submitting for a different regulatory classification. And this is something that we have seen with some of our existing customers. I recently spoke to one of our customers that is a startup in the blood testing space, and they have a lab developed test that they're using, and their goal long-term is to commercialize this as an IVD. So right now they're using Synode to compile all of that information, all the research data in Synode, which will make it easier for them when they move into commercializing this particular lab developed test. And next, we're just going to take a quick look at some of the screenshots directly from Synode, since I've been talking quite a bit about Synode, but what does this visually look like for you if you were to use Synode for some of these activities? So here is an example of a method validation workflow that you can set up in Synode. And this workflow can be templated multiple times. So if you ever need to do this validation again, or do this validation with minor tweaks. You can template this existing workflow, make your adjustments, and all the existing work that you've already put into sign-out, such as your protocol steps, the different protocols themselves that are part of the workflow, will be copied over when you template a workflow. And then we'll also look at what does it look like to capture your data in sign-out. So here we have what we call a task page in sign-out, which is where your protocol steps, your results are captured. And this is just a quick preview on what the protocol steps look like. You can see the various assigned items, whether they're instruments or reagents that are being used. And you can also have a high-level overview on the organization of how your various projects are set up in sign-out. And I briefly mentioned this, where your protocol steps are, where the assigned items are. And then, of course, there's a separate section for the results entirely. And then we have a compliance aspect, which is very important. So in sign-out, your data is always tracked throughout the process. So you can always go back and check what changes were made. You can see a history of the various activities performed in a particular protocol. And everything is timestamped with a user ID. So you'll know who did it, when, and what time they did it at. And then we have a signature review process as well. So once your protocol is completed, if you need it reviewed by, say, someone from QA or an independent reviewer, you can have them review the protocol steps as well as the results and sign off on the task. And once the signatures are complete, the task is locked. So this doesn't allow anyone to edit any of the data once the task is locked using signatures. And now I'm going to hand it over to Matjaž to kind of talk about the other side of the coin. Matjaž, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. Yeah, with the other side of the coin, I mean the other side of the kits and reagents being used, and that's in the labs, right? So on the consumption end. So there are so labs use assays and tests in various different ways. So they can be either used in clinical aspects, which in these cases, the assays have to be IVD certified, or that can be animal health, plant health, environmental testing, food safety, and so on. The labs can fall under various regulations and certifications, either by FDA or IVDR, CLIA for clinical labs, ISO 17025, or something even more specific, depending on the domain in which the lab is working. And labs can consume or use the kits or reagents as they were manufactured, so commercial off the shelf, or they can also modify this test, so switch a reagent or adapt the reagent to their specific needs, or they can also develop their own tests, so develop lab-developed tests, so LDTs. And whichever aspect the lab is using the tests or assays, they still have to perform some things, right? So this either has to be a full-blown validation. So these are the steps that Arun was covering quite in detail, and that's for the aspects whether for the cases where labs are developing their own assays or where they are modifying the commercial tests, right? And these tests usually include, let's say, validation of performance characteristics such as accuracy, precision, analytical sensitivity, and so on. Verification is a set of tests that lab use when they're introducing a kit into the operation. So even if they are not modifying the kit, they still need to make sure that whatever the manufacturer stated is true. So this is usually a subset of the tests, such as linearity, precision, or accuracy is being measured here. And once the assays and the kits are being introduced, so the methods have to be maintained. So there has to be a calibration procedures in place, or control procedures. And with all of these different aspects, ELNs can actually help quite a bit. So we've seen in a practical aspects a couple of examples that Arun showcased. So with traceability, with the ease of reporting, linking the experimental data with the validation data, and so on. And the underlying basic principles of that are very heavily related to compliance. So in the next slide, please, I'd like to talk a little bit about the key aspects that ELN can bring or should bring actually when they're being used in either development or validation of assays on the manufacturing side or in the lab side. So first of all is traceability. We've heard about it in the previous slides. So typically the traceability shouldn't cause any additional problems. This is a functionality that should be built into the ELN. And this means that the ELNs should, show history of changes, display audit trails, and so on. Control access is a very important thing. Typically, ELNs solve that with having a role-based access to electronic records. This actually means that only authorized personnel, authorized people can have access to specific electronic records, and that's very important for authenticity of records, integrity, and confidentiality as well. Electronic signatures have to be in place to ensure data integrity, and they should typically be compliant with standards or regulations, guidelines by either FDA or Annex 11, that's a European counterpart. And lastly, it might be obvious that compliance usually requires the electronic or the digital platforms to have human readable copies of them. And this actually means that the electronic system should be possible to create either reports or prepare exports, which can actually be very useful for sharing the information also outside of the ELN or the digital platform to maybe the departments that might not be using the ELN, such as QA, QC, and manufacturing. So that's a very important feature. Next, the ELNs have to actually have some technical requirements to be used in compliant environments. And these include the data security, so data encryption, backup strategy that has to be all in place. And in addition to that, there have to be certain procedures in place on the ELN providers or on the ELN vendor side, as well as on the end user side. And these have to do with the software validation, change control procedures and measurements. Jana talked about that. And I would really like to point out the support part. So the support aspect of electronic platforms. This is really a varied, vendors have typically very varied level of support for their customers. And with this, I mean the onboarding to the tool, the training about the tool, maintenance of the tool, helping transition from the previous system to the new system, technical support. And this is, I think, a very key thing that can make or break the adoption of any digital platform, including the ELNs. And here is, I think, where I would strongly suggest that whenever you are assessing certain vendors for ELN, that this is something that has to be checked quite thoroughly. And I think here Signout is playing a really good part. And I think in conclusion, I'd like to summarize. Next slide, please. We saw that there's quite a bit of similarities on the reagent manufacturer, kit manufacturer, and in the end user side. We also saw that the ELN can actually support a majority of the phases of the method development lifecycle, so including the establishment and then the implementation. And lastly, maybe more of a tip, whenever you are looking for to implement a digital platform such as an ELN, unopinionated ELN such as Signout which means that they are not overfitted for a specific domain, let's say genomic or cheminformatic. They offer quite a big level of flexibility to be used either in various environments or industries, so from clinical to environmental, and actually help to promote the collaboration between different departments, so from research to development to manufacturing, quality control, quality assurance. So that would be a couple of my tips. And I think we will run another poll here at this moment. So it's a digitalization challenge. Basically, if you can take a couple of tens of seconds to share with us what's the biggest challenge when you are or you were digitizing your lab. And we can spend a couple of seconds waiting for a response. Then I guess we can comment on your answers. I think this is enough time. Okay, so the distribution is a bit different. And I can also invite maybe Anna and Arun to comment in as well. So the winners are the data overload. Yeah, that's the most common answer, and the rest are evenly spread. I think that this actually does mean that there are quite a lot of challenges out there, and maybe there isn't a clear winner. And I think the overload is maybe the most significant response here.
Yeah.
Any comments, Jana, Arun?
Yeah, I think so. In general, I think not just related to kit development and manufacturing. We see also so data overload, of course, and then also this integration complexities. It's not easy, if you're a small organization, these integrations tend to be quite expensive, and there's no out of the box solution to integrate different systems. So this will continue to persist, this specific challenge. Whereas with lack of user buy-in, or this will improve in time, in my opinion, when in general people are more educated on change management. So yeah, I expect this to improve over time.
And I guess the only comment I'll add is the data overload challenge is something we hear from a lot of our customers, not just assay kit development or people working in that industry, but also in genomics, biotech, and even pharma development. And one thing I'd like to address, at least from Synode standpoint, is we do have a nice way for you to establish a structure and enforce that structure across all individuals using Synode when it comes to data capture and data management. And with that being said, we'll jump on to our next topic, which is just going to be a quick open discussion on emerging digital trends. I would like to kick this off based on some of the feedback or questions I get from engaging with customers or even prospects. So something that's been coming up a lot in the past 6 to 12 months has been the topic of AI. So I've had customers ask about, do you have plans of introducing some sort of AI elements into Signote, whether it's for predictive analytics or generative AI? So Mathias, I'll first throw it over to you as the head of product at Signote. How are we planning on tackling this?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So yeah, AI, we've been hearing a lot about the AI, not just we. So everyone on this planet, I think there's for the past 2 years, been quite a lot of information overload, and this is actually quite a complex thing. That I think part of the challenge is that not everyone understands, how AI works, how AI really works, and that I think contributes to assumptions how AI could or should be used in various products, right? So I just like to maybe point out a couple of areas where Signote and I think also other ELN and other digital platforms vendors are thinking about. So one is this the ability for the for AI algorithms to be trained on specific data of a, let's say, customer ELN, and this can actually then help inform the customer by predicting perhaps the next steps of the experiment. And another great aspect that we think would be really helpful is that AI and its predictive power can be actually used to maybe promote the good data management practices. For example, when you are completing an experiment, to remind you that did you sign it, did you fill out all the dates, is something missing, right? So to kind of help you with managing good, clean data practices. Another aspect is summarization of data, right? So large language models are really good at summarizing the information. So that's, next level reporting. And this is something that we are already doing with Signote. A third example would be transforming the content, for example, parsing the data, let's say taking the protocols out of the PDFs, out of the Word documents and so on, into Signote interactive protocols. So this is something that we have also started to work on, but is something that could really help with the efficiency part of the processes. Another aspect that I want to touch is also the using of voice commands. So not just to control, the flow of experiments when you are in the lab, and to maybe record your comments and notes while you're executing work in the lab, but also to maybe use use LLMs, so large language models, as an alternative interface to the graphical user interface. So we all know that we can, have conversations with, with AI tools, and replacing that and replacing just the typing, interaction with the keyboard with voice. So text to voice, voice to text could actually help us having conversations with the tool itself. So that I think would be quite a different game when it would come to interacting with, with digital tools. So it's another aspect. And the last one, you touched a little bit on it, Arun, is machine learning and AI to perform, to perform some level of magic on the research data itself. So finding some patterns, either it's the outliers or some trends in the research data. So that's another aspect that's I think pertains really well to the ELNs, because they are one of the platforms that host quite a lot of research and scientific data. So that would be my kind of a quick take on AI and ML trends.
Awesome. Thank you, Matjaž. Jana, anything to add or comment in addition to Matjaž?
Yeah, I mean, the technology offers really great opportunities. We've seen ML, so machine learning algorithms, help optimize assay parameters and component interactions. So, this can ensure then accurate or reproducible results. So in the, let's say, kit design phase, or, we can, I've seen, so within the kit performance and stability testing, so you can use historical data, use machine learning, and then you can predict the stability of the components over time. So I think this is really beneficial as well. In general, data analysis and interpretation of the results, so especially in diagnostic kits, can help by learning from the historical patient data results, minimizing human error and improving the accuracy. This goes specifically for the kit providers that have a device as well. So if you have a machine learning implemented within the results analysis part of your application, you can really improve on the result interpretation. And then you're more so the technician or whoever is performing the analysis, they're less likely to make the interpretation mistake, which can also save lives in certain applications. So yeah, I think there's we could have a separate webinar just on the machine learning and applications, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. So now we'll actually take some time for questions. We do have a couple of questions that came in, and I know we're a bit over time, so we apologize for that. But we'll quickly address some of these questions. So the first question, how long does it typically take to implement a digital tool like ELN or LIMS? So Jana, I'll hand it over to you first, and then Matej and I can comment after that.
Sure. It really depends. How many laboratories you have, or how many people you want to onboard. So my suggestion would be to plan at least a couple of months to a year, depending on the size of operation. Because the rollout plan, especially if you have multiple laboratories, should be gradual. So you need to have a rollout plan, and this takes some time as well. And during that process, you want to make sure that you ticked all the boxes and that everything is properly implemented. Of course, if you're a smaller operation, you can have everything up and running within a month. So basically, in this case, it is important, how big the project is. But typically, we see somewhere, for full implementation, somewhere from 6 months to a year. And then for really large companies, it can even be, 2 years or 3.
Yeah, definitely. I can confirm or agree with what you said, Jana, since I've been supporting some implementation with our customers, and I've seen the range from a matter of months to even up to a year. So our smaller customers with like 2 to 5 scientists, they get up and running within 2 or 3 months. Our larger enterprise customers, up to a year. If it's government, could even be longer because there's more red tape, more stakeholders. But yeah, it's important to plan at the beginning how long you want your timeline to look like. Matej, anything to add, or can we jump to the next question?
I think we can jump to the next question, yeah.
Great. Okay, so next question. I think this one is more aimed towards you, Jana. Which tools can I use for process mapping?
Oh, there are so many, and most of them are free. I use Draw.io, but you can have Canva, Lucidchart. I think if you search for a process mapping software, you will get a few hits, and most of them are free to use. So this helps a lot as well, so that you can start immediately.
Awesome. And we have one last question, but for our audience out there, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box to type out your questions. And the last question I have, Jana, I think you might have touched on this a little bit already. Can you give us a few examples of machine learning applications in kit development and manufacturing?
Yeah, I think we already covered this. Yeah, I think we've commented on it really. So if there are some other questions, we can also skip that one.
All right. Well, give it another minute or two for any new questions to come in.
Other than that, maybe I can comment on the first topic. So I think that on how long the implementation of the tools can take, right? So I think that one of the challenges that at least I see when I'm observing our customers is how so the level of maturity, the digital maturity that they are at, right? So I also saw it from my end when I was working in the lab, right? Sometimes I thought, we will buy this tool and everything will, work like magic. So the processes will be fixed, everything will work, right? So that was an example of very low level of awareness or of digital awareness. So of course, a lot of things have to be done on the customer end, and the sooner you understand that, the smoother the process will be. So there is, buying the tool is not going to do all the magic. You have to do quite a bit of work on your end. So maybe that's a very general. I know it's a general tip, but I think it's a very useful one.
Absolutely. Well, I don't see any other questions that have come in, and we are a little bit over time. So on that note, we're going to close it out. Once again, thank you so much for your time. Today, we're excited to present all this information to you. If you have any questions or any concerns or anything we weren't able to address today, please feel free to reach out to the SignOut team or the Biosystemica team. You have our email addresses here, and someone from one of our teams will be reaching out to you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mateusz. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Arun.